A couple of weeks ago, McCall's was having a sale on patterns, and they were all about $2.99, so I just threw a bunch of them in the cart thinking one day I will make them. And that day came sooner than I thought. I was trolling on Mood for a different project when I ran into their new haberdashery collection. I chose the white and black knickknacks one. It has a bunch of hand-drawn pincushions and thread, needle, scissors. It was so charming, and so I picked it immediately and decided to do the blouse because I already had the pattern. Now let's nail down this blouse a little bit. I called it the oldie-timey blouse because it doesn't have a time period put on the pattern, but I did a little research and it looks like to be a little bit of late Edwardian, about 1913 to 1917. I found some images that support this at the V&A Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. The images that I found had a similar collar, sort of Peter Pan collar that's curved, and they have the certain sleeves that are connected to the bodice in a kimono sleeve so that the sleeves go right into the side seam. A lot of the research that I did, I saw a lot of set-in sleeves, meaning that the sleeve is constructed separately and then it joins to the bodice at a shoulder seam. So it was a little hard to find these images in a blouse. Before starting construction on the blouse, I wanted to look up some reviews. Because it already comes with a pattern, I didn't want to make a mock-up. I get a little impatient and I want to just finish it and get it done. So I wanted to look up some reviews to see what other people had to say. The ones I did find only talked about that the French seams were difficult, maybe seemed unnecessary, and that the bodice was a little bit short. In defense of the pattern, for this time period, this shirt is supposed to be short. Skirts were high-waisted, so you didn't want the extra bulk at the bottom of the shirt to be seen underneath the skirt. You don't want any of those lines in there. So it's cropped specifically. Now, if you're tall like me, it's probably a little too cropped. Every time I raised my arms, it would come untucked from the skirt. And they did have ways to combat that in the time period. They could pin it to their skirt, they could put a belt on top to hold it in place, or they even had these blouse retainers that you put around your waist to hold your blouse down. However, for me, I think it was a little too short, 5'9", long torso, so I added a little bit of extra length in that, just in the length of the waistband. It just needed that little extra 1.5 inches to keep it in there. One of the things that I found that was a little bit troubling with the pattern is the markings for the collar. Now, I could say that it could have been my fault. I could have marked it lazily, but as you can see in one of my pictures, based on where I put the line, the collar was placed right there. But it overlapped, and obviously you want the collar to just abut in the front and not overlap. And so that caused all sorts of weird puckering in the collar. So I had to re-mark the center fronts, basically take the whole collar off. And that worked out in my favor anyway. I felt like the collar was a little large. I personally didn't like the aesthetic, but also I couldn't really find any research to support the width of it. I did see some collars that came higher up on the neck that were sort of fatter like that, but this one sort of lies down in a different way. So I decided to take 5/8 off the bottom. So I took the curve that comes around the center front and then just kind of blended that into 5/8 shorter. I also found a little bit of issue with the cuffs. They were about 2 inches too large, so I had to gather in the sleeve a little bit tighter and then reduce the length of the cuff. Now at this point, I think it's important to note that even though my bust, waist, and hip fell right on the size 18, those are only 3 measurements. So just because somebody has those measurements doesn't mean the corresponding wrist measurement is going to be exactly on, or the neck measurement, the neck circumference is going to be the same. Everyone's body is a little bit different. So that could be something challenging with this pattern, is that in some ways it's forgiving because you have that gathered in waistline, and so that's easy to adjust for if you have a larger bust but a smaller waist. You can just gather it in tighter and then reduce the length of the waistband. With things like the collar, you got to make sure you don't mess up that curve and make sure everything lines up. And if you're not used to troubleshooting on a pattern, that could be difficult for you. So in that regards, I would say this is an intermediate pattern. But like I said, all my measurements lined up perfectly on the size 18. It fit across my bust well. I didn't have problems with it gapping in the buttons, which is something with modern day blouses I have a lot of trouble with. I photographed mine in a regular bra, so I haven't yet tried it with the corset of the time period. So I'd be curious to see how that makes it lay different and how that would make having the correct understructures and skirt would change the silhouette. I didn't find the French seams to be as cumbersome as some of the other reviews that I read. The only time that it seemed like something was up was when I was connecting the seams at the bottom of the sleeve into the side seam. There was too much bulk in the seam in the armpit area, so it was pulling and puckering. So I ended up having to clip that area, which means that I had to clip into the French seam, which seemed to be a little bit counterproductive. All in all, I think I would give this pattern a 5 out of 5. It's easy to adjust, but you do have to have a little bit of knowledge and troubleshooting, so it does have that intermediate sort of construction on there, but the French seams went in beautifully. I found them very therapeutic to get them so right and straight and perfect. It was great. As always, keep sewing, keep practicing, keep trying, and create yourself outfits that fit you, that you love, and have fun just wearing and enjoying clothes.